Okay, great thanks to the artist. So, it was a year ago I got a call from Buffalo, New York, Hugh Pratt. He heard about Mural Mania and he said, can I come down to, was it possible to bring your murals up to my play in Buffalo at the Inner Harbor? Just, go ahead. So Hugh called me. We were trying to actually transport the Lions mural to Buffalo. We never pulled it off, but I met a new friend. And because of Hugh Pratt, who came to Macedon, and he's written this wonderful play called The Ditch, Clinton's Ditch. And Al has a copy he can show you here what it looks like. And we're going to hopefully put that on here in either Macedon or Lions at the Oman Theater. We're working on that, right, John? John? Where'd he go? So he'll tell you more about it later. But I found out in this play, Red Jacket's in this play. And that's Al's great-great-great-grandfather, or five? Uncle? Okay, well, he's related to Red Jacket, so that's pretty cool. And I met Al afterwards, and we exchanged emails and cards and things, and especially when I heard about Bev starting the Native American, the Mural Within a Mural, I said, you got to get a hold of Al Parker. And he's graciously driven out to Macedon, New York from Buffalo today to tell you about the Native way. So you have a better understanding about those who walk before us. And he's going to even help out the Sodas Point mural, because I saw Bruce and Edie talking to him earlier, so Barrington. So without further ado, I'd like to have Al Parker tell us about the Native ways. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Am I loud enough? Well, I want to thank especially Mark for the invitation to spend some time with you here this afternoon on this dedication of this beautiful mural. And I want to talk briefly about my background and my tie with not only the nations, but give you a little background on especially one part of the picture here, one part of the painting. And I had occasion to talk with some of those that were involved directly with this mural. And Mark and we did meet in Buffalo. I took part in a play, Clinton's Ditch. I had a couple of parts in there, and Red Jacket happened to be the person I was portraying. And I've done that extensively, especially in the Buffalo area. If you get to Buffalo, New York, you'll find the monument. Red Jacket Monument at the entrance of Forest Lawn Cemetery. And I also want to mention, a little bit of background there. Name is Parker, Al Parker, and in front of the Red Jacket Monument at Forest Lawn, the entrance of Forest Lawn, is also the headstone to Ely Parker. So I'm a descendant also of Ely S. Parker, and if you're not familiar with Ely Parker, he was Ulysses Grant's military secretary, and he went ahead and signed the surrender terms April 9th, 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse. He rose to the rank of Brigadier General. And then further back in time, for any of you that are historians, I have ties to Handsome Lake, which would be our sixth generation grandfather. So we've got some famous Seneca people in our family line, and it's an honor for me to portray, especially Red Jacket. Is quite well known. I would think that some of you here have probably heard of Red Jacket. He had been out this way. I don't know if he was in Macedon, but he was in the territories there. And you find his name on many of the treaties back in the 1700s, late 1700s. But working with Bev, I did consult and we did make some, advisory comments on the one portion on this mural here. And if you take a close look at the mural, it's full. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. This one's worth 1,000 words. And it's full of tradition. It's full of our tradition. And if you want to spend some time looking at the far corner of this painting, you'll find 8 of our clans, existing clans today. We call it the four-leggeds and the two-leggeds, the four-legged animals and the two-legged birds. And then, of course, in that mural, there's many things, and I have to take a look at it. There's symbolism of the five original nations, which would be the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and the Seneca. Those are the five original. The sixth nation would be the addition of Tuscarora to the Confederacy. That symbol is up there. In a far distant, you'll see a tree with an eagle on the top, and that comes from the establishment of our Constitution called the Great Law. It's a planting of a white pine tree, and it was the time when the Confederation was brought together. These five nations, warring factions, that was brought together by the peacemaker. He uprooted that white pine tree and brought the warring factions together, and at that time engaged 50 of the leaders of the five original nations and brought them to peace terms. When he uprooted that tree, it was the peacemaker that brought them to consensus to put their weapons of war away. And when he uprooted that tree, they all agreed to cast their weapons of war into the abyss forever. That's the basic principle of the philosophy of the Haudenosaunee Six Nations. And of course, I think I mentioned the 8 clans are, in that illustration. I had a little tough time finding them, but with Bev's help, I was able to identify at least 8 of them. And there's more. There's more in that illustration. Of course, the Longhouse, the Haudenosaunee is translated as people of the Longhouse. And then in the left-hand side of that illustration is the Longhouse. And we consider the territories here from the east end of the state of New York to the western end of New York State. We consider that our Longhouse. And when you think about that Longhouse, it encompassed this very area that we stand in here today. And it is on the far east end were the Mohawks. And because it is a Longhouse, you see, they were the keepers of the eastern door. And on the far west end of the state, our territories would be the Seneca. Seneca became the keepers of the western door. And of course, at Onondaga would be the Central Council Fire. That's the main governing body. The council fires are conducted at Onondaga, New York. And coming this way from the Mohawk territory would be the Oneida people, and Onondaga. And then, of course, we're in about the area where both Cayuga and Seneca territories were originally. But I found it interesting that there was a basket maker here, and that's happened for thousands of years. And you just happen to have one here in Macedon. I understand they call him Indian Charlie, and I'm sure there's still some Indian Charlies around too. But it's certainly a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and I'll be around. That if you got any questions or inquiries, relative to Native people, I am a historian, and I partake in many events. Not only locally, but on a national level also. I'll be traveling down to New York City. I'm involved with Civil War roundtables, not only in the state, but out of state. I work with the Buffalo Historical Society. I'm a board member of the old Fort Niagara. And so there's many things that I get myself involved in, and certainly it's my motivation is to better understand history. And I find today with the audiences that I've been before, there's a great interest in history today. And one aspect that I hope to fulfill is not a lot is known about the Native aspect, because that's much less talked about today. But I find writers also today are contributing to not only the American history, but to Native history. And it has become a part of the statewide curriculum. I know there's an emphasis in the 4th grade to address Native issues and culture and tradition. And I had some experience with the Native American Magnet School in Buffalo, School 19. and I taught there for a number of years. I work with pre-K through 8th grade, so I get these invitations constantly to talk to 4th and 5th graders. But that's wonderful that I can work with young kids, and I love working with kids because kids today are so important to us. They are our future. But there's certainly much to learn from our culture. And I should maybe mention to you that it's the 75th or 76th Congress that recognized the contributions to the U.S. Constitution, recognizing the Iroquois Confederacy for their contributions to the U.S. Constitution. And that was quite an undertaking. That was challenged, and it's still challenged today. But I can assure you that there is much that the Founding Fathers saw within the original 6 nations and the territories here that helped to influence the founders of this country. And one of them is right in that painting with the pine tree. And as you can see on that illustration, there's an eagle that sits atop, and that's the eagle that sits atop your American flag. And that pine tree is very significant. There's a great metaphor in that pine tree, in that if you take a sprout from the pine tree, you take one of them sprouts, you see there's 5 needles there. Those are the 5 nations, 5 original nations. And those white roots extend in 4 sacred directions. And the story goes that if you follow those roots to that tree, it'll take you to the tree of peace. And the significance of this philosophy that's been given to us as a gift is to understand conflict, war, and peace. And to better understand, that's where some of the Founding Fathers took these things from. And if you look at a dollar bill, if you got a dollar bill in your pocket or somebody got one handy, you'll see an eagle with a clutch of, I believe it's arrows. If you got a dollar bill, count up the arrows in the clutch. How many did you count in there, Mark? He's counting them right now. Okay, you can only count to 10, did you say?
Yeah. There's a lot.
How many arrows in there?
13.
13 arrows. What do you think 13 stands for? Anybody?
Wow.
13 colonies. Well, you see, when the peacemaker brought these warring factions together, what he did was he held up an arrow and he said, look, he said, I can break one arrow. But he took 5 arrows representing the 5 nations and he bound them together and he said, you see, look, we bind those arrows together and we can find unity in peace by unifying the 5 nations. And that was a symbolism coming from the peacemaker, and that's part of this influence that I mentioned about on the Constitution and the Founding Fathers of this country. But I guess I've gone long enough, and certainly there's much more to talk about. And I want to thank all of you in your community here for the invitation to come down here and have a chance to spend some time with you and a little bit of a short talk on history. And I want to thank you so much, and I'll be around here, if you got any questions. So thank you.